Screen resolution is a relatively straightforward idea. Typically, the number of pixels spanning the height of a display indicates its relative resolution. For example, 1080p for 1080 pixels from top to bottom, 2160p for 2160 of those pixels, etc. I use the word relative because there are variations in screen dimensions. For example, this ultra-wide monitor to my right, which you can check out in more detail in the card above me, is still technically a 1080p monitor, even though the pixel dimensions are 1080 by 2560. These resolutions, however, do not define pixel density, that is, the number of individual pixels that span a particular length. I've attached a link in this video's description to a website that will actually calculate PPI for you. It's pretty cool. Simply type in your screen's pixel dimensions followed by its diagonal length, and voila, you'll have your screen's pixel density. Am I come up here? Okay, I should also note that you can do this with any screen size, including your phone, tablet, computer monitor, or television. But okay, knowing your screen's pixel density is one thing, but what does this have to do with viewing distance? Well, if you think about it, there is a certain distance away from any screen in which individual pixels become indiscernible. Steve Jobs said it better than anyone else.
In any display, there are pixels. Here's 4 of them. We start off with the Retina display by dramatically increasing the pixel density. Now, the Retina display has 326 pixels per inch. There's never been a display like this on a phone. People haven't even dreamed about a display like this on a phone. But it's more than that. It turns out that there's a magic number right around 300 pixels per inch that when you hold something around 10 or 12 inches away from your eyes is the limit of the human retina to differentiate the pixels. And so they're so close together when you get at this 300 pixels per inch threshold that all of a sudden things start to look like continuous curves. Like text looks like you've seen it in a fine printed book, unlike you've ever seen on an electronic display before. And at 326 pixels per inch, we are comfortably over that limit.
At this point, the display in question would become a Retina display, Apple's trademark for a display so sharp the human eye is incapable of distinguishing individual pixels. And this is true. If you have a phone with a 1080p display and a screen size of around 5 inches, holding the phone around half an arm's length away from your eyes will result in this effect. The same principle applies to TVs. I've attached a Retina calculator in the description of this video as well. So this is where the meat of the topic begins. Past a certain viewing distance, pixels become indistinguishable, regardless of the resolution. Even a 640 by 480 resolution, which is ancient by today's standards, becomes Retina at some point, given a particular screen size. This chart attempts to quantify optimal resolutions given screen size on the x-axis and viewing distance on the y. There are several types of this chart and each varies to a degree, but we'll assume this model for televisions and a separate model for monitors in which viewers typically sit much closer to the screen. So let's look at 480p. While not a standard any longer, we can start here and work our way down. If we assume a screen size of say 40 inches and a viewing distance of 20 feet, or just over 6 meters, all resolutions including 480p will look the same. That is, you won't be able to see the difference between a 4K image and a 480p image given this particular screen size and viewing distance. That's a pretty radical idea, right? But okay, let's try another using 720p as our base this time. Let's assume our screen size is 60 inches, indicative of a fairly large TV, although you won't find many TVs of this size with only a 720p resolution. But bear with me, you'll see where I'm going with this. Let's also assume a viewing distance of 15 feet, typical for most folks watching television in a living room. With this screen size and at this viewing distance, all HD resolutions are indistinguishable. If the definition of HD is throwing you for a bit of a loop, go ahead and check out the card above me. So this is crazy. 1080p and 4K have become the television standards over the past several years, pushing 720p to the wayside. But according to this logic, those additional pixels in both the vertical and horizontal are completely pointless past a certain distance. If you're finding all of this hard to believe, you can test this actually with a 4K monitor. Pull up any modern game, something like Grand Theft Auto 5, and then set your gaming resolution to 1080p. Then sit an arm's length away from a computer monitor, roughly 2 feet or 60 centimeters. We'll use this graph for this test as it's much less forgiving at close distances. If your monitor size is 25 inches and you're sitting 2 feet away from your screen, then by this graph's definition, 1080p is not your optimal resolution, and you should be able to discern some individual pixels on your screen, or at least notice some jaggies on round objects. Now, with this mental picture still in mind, change the in-game resolution to 4K. You should see a clear difference between this and the 1080p version. For those of you who consistently game in 4K, this should be of no surprise. Most of you only remain about 2 feet away from your monitor at all times, and you can definitely see the difference between 1080p and 2160p given the screen size. However, if your optimal monitor viewing distance is 4 feet instead of 2, the two resolutions aforementioned will likely be indistinguishable. So in this case, purchasing a 4K monitor rather than a 1080p one would be a waste of additional money, assuming your viewing distance will remain fixed. I'll end this video with one final thought. Optimal viewing distance is dependent on screen size and pixel density. However, an independent factor also plays a role here: eyesight. 20/20 vision is a ratio that compares your eyesight to that of an average human being. It can be translated to mean I see the same amount of detail from 20 feet away that the average person sees from 20 feet away. A person with 20/15 vision could say the following: I see the same amount of detail from 20 feet away that the average person sees from 15 feet away, indicating that that person has an above average eyesight. In this case, that person's entire view chart would be skewed because he or she can see a greater level of detail and a greater number of pixels to an extent from the same distance. Inversely, if that person's eyesight is, say, 20/40, then the entire graph would be skewed in the opposite direction, because he or she can only see the same level of detail that a human with normal eyesight can if that person sits twice as close to the monitor in question. This goes without saying, the graphs I've been showing you in this video are not fixed, but rather change from person to person and case to case. Light levels, the type of screen being used, and even the degree of eyesight correction implemented will all change these results by certain degrees. Nonetheless, the overall point still stands. Optimal viewing distance is determined by pixel density and screen size. If you want to get fancy with it, I suggest performing calculations similar to those you can find here before purchasing that 60-inch flat panel or 34-inch ultra-wide. If you like the topic discussed in this video, be sure to give this thing a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down if you feel the complete opposite, click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and stay tuned for a future PC build. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.